In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know.
Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? This is a reality we simply have to accept. Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to another edition of In the Know. I am your host, Tony Reeves. Let's get started. Today, I want to talk to you about navigating the crossroad, caring for an aging parent. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this topic is because, I'm 55 years old. I'm going to go ahead and share my age a bit, but I'm at this point where I've been in the legal community for over 20 years as an attorney and so forth, and I can tell you, I've always been amazed by the number of people who've approached me over the years, basically asking input. And typically, it's typically the same. It's usually something has happened with their parent, whether it be a traumatic event like a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, or maybe it's just a slow-moving kind of decline in their cognitive abilities and so forth. And you would be surprised the number of times I've had people who've approached me who've literally asked me a variety of questions. And usually the questions involve a range of things from healthcare surrogates, power of attorney, estate planning, all of those types of navigations and so forth. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm only bar licensed in Florida, so I try to steer them quickly to a attorney in their area as quickly as I possibly can. But the hard reality is that when you're raised by your parents, there is a viewpoint that you have. If you think about it, they are your support system. They are your infrastructure. They are your backbone. They're the persons that you go to. But when you now find that the roles are slowly about to be reversed, I'm often amazed at how strong my friends are when they have to face this reality that now they are now operating within the position of doing the things for their parents that their parents used to do for them. And I can tell you that it's tough because I understand, and I've had countless stories where I've had people ask me things and I've had to, not only have the hat on as a dear, caring friend, but also giving them kind of the cold reality of what it means to be an attorney in terms of saying certain things. But when you find yourself at that crossroad, the reality is that you're going to experience some emotional challenges and you're going to experience some practical challenges. So what I want to do today is I want to take a minute or two to kind of talk about those things. And hopefully I can provide you some insight that could be helpful to you. One of the first things that I like to stress to people is that there is no playbook for dealing with health challenges when it relates to your parents. If you stop and you think about it, when your parents were raising you, there really was no playbook for them raising you. And so when we're growing up, especially as we go into adulthood and we find ourselves in the position of being in leadership positions or in parental positions, we often defer back to the lessons and the guidance that our parents gave us. And for all the things that they did for us when we were coming up, the harsh reality is that they were kind of winging it in terms of doing things. Well, guess what? When you are now in a position where your parents are in need of your assistance, you're in the unfortunate position, you're going to have to wing it too. And that's not something that most of us can wrap our brains around, because we often look at our parents as the persons who have all the answers. And the reality is that they kind of learn the answers by trial and error in terms of all the things that they went through. You're on a different position, meaning your parents don't necessarily prepare you for how to take care of them. So what that normally means in your particular case is that you now have to take a step back and pay close attention to the fact that you're now having to learn how to do what you need to do in this new role that you're in. And I can tell you it can be a daunting challenge on both ends, whether it be based on a traumatic incident that occurred that you now have to adjust to really quickly, or even a slow decline that you saw coming but you were hoping to push it off as long as possible. Just keep in the back of your mind and always remember that, there is no playbook for how to deal with these health challenges. You just kind of have to wing it and trust that you're making the decisions that's in the best interest of your family along the way. So let's talk a little bit about what it means when you're dealing with a parent who's going through what I call the slow transition. Here's the difficulty that you have in this case. This is a situation where you are dealing with a loved one who you're noticing some decline. It's not so much that you don't see it. It's just that you don't see where it's getting to the point where it may be a problem. Now, let's just be clear about something. Your parents are independent. They were independent for a number of years before you were born, and they were independent the entire time of your life. So a lot of times what happens is in the early phases of noticing the cognitive decline or just decline in skills, whether because of arthritis or back issues or things of that nature, you're basing their ability to do things based on their ability to do things that they always do. And so what ends up happening is that when you're looking at them, there's a natural inclination to want to say, are they doing what they used to do at the same level as what they used to? And as long as it's close to that, you might be inclined to not interject because it is your desire to let your parents be as independent as possible. The troubling thing is when you notice that some of the things they used to do, they can't do. Maybe their ability to respond is going down in terms of their ability to drive. Maybe you're noticing that, it takes them a little longer to get up and down the stairs. Either way, it's important for you to recognize that when you're watching your parents that are going through something and it's a slow decline, it can be tough. See, a traumatic event is a little different because if somebody has a slip and fall or a stroke or a heart attack, there's usually just this traumatic event and there's a major change in their ability to do things right out the gate. So what ends up happening in that particular instance, you kind of deal with it from that point as your starting point and you're trying to get them back to a particular point. However, the reality is that if they are slowly declining, you have to be intensely and acutely aware that they are experiencing these changes. And more importantly, they may be resistant to you telling them that they're not able to do the things that they used to do. So during this time, be patient, but just be cognizant of what's going on and don't be thrown completely off if you're having to kind of drop those subtle messages that maybe it's time for them to adapt to what you would view as probably what I call the new norm. Here's a big thing that people pop up to me all the time: the legal and the personal considerations. Most people, when they come to me and when they're talking to me about asking me about the legal issues related to their parents, I often tell them, if you're coming to me now, you probably have been at this place for a number of months. And so now you're trying to say to yourself, okay, I've been here at this while, but I've been so reluctant to make moves that I'm a little leery about doing anything. But now your parents are at this particular point where you've made this decision that, hey, they are well beyond the point of where you can just kind of sit off to the side and just kind of summarily, take some steps passively. So what I sometimes will share to people is a couple of things. First of all, I tell them, listen, a couple of things you need to be aware of. Don't be afraid to take the step, and don't be afraid to reach out to an attorney. At this point in time, if your parents haven't planned for the future in terms of what I call estate planning, you may have to take that extra step with them. And what do I mean by estate planning? You have to ask yourself, okay, if you're noticing that your parents are starting to decline, you've got to ask yourself, okay, what happens when they can no longer make decisions for themselves? That means you need to figure out what's the laws in your state regarding power of attorney. What happens if they're in the hospital? You need somebody's going to have to make decisions regarding their nature of care, whether it be therapy, whether it be treatment, things of that nature. That's usually a healthcare surrogate. You also want to find out if they have what their decisions are about what we call DNR, do not resuscitate, which means if they have to have a machine keep them alive, do they want that machine to keep them alive? Some people don't want that. Some people, they're okay with that. And so you want to get all of these things out of the way while your parents are still within their ability to be able to make decisions on their own. Because let me just be clear. Once they get to the point where there's issues where their ability to make decisions is impacted, then things get really wonky. And you don't want to be in that wonky space. And so you want to make sure you start asking those questions in advance, which is why talking to an attorney is important. But then you got to think about the personal considerations. When you're talking to your loved ones, or your parents in particular, don't come in there barnstorming, telling them what they will and won't do. Remember, these are people who were grown before you were born. So respect them and give them the dignity that they deserve in terms of understanding that there is a partnership between the two of you, or the three of you, depending on who you are, that you want to do whatever is possible to help them make decisions that's going to be in their best interest and in the best interest of people around them. Because here's the thing, you want your parents to be in control of the decisions about what's going to happen to them. So anything you do should be based on their wishes, not yours, theirs. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're starting to find yourself having to dive into this realm of what I'd like to affectionately refer to of these life-altering decision makings that have legal and personal consequences. So for the final segment, I want to talk to you about 5 things that I want you to keep in mind when you find yourself transitioning to taking care of your aging parents. First, expect feedback from many sources. I want you to get ready to have people around you who are going to give you feedback. And that's going to include your parents, but it's also going to include loved ones and friends who know them better than you in terms of them dealing with them on a regular basis when you haven't been there, as well as third parties such as doctors and therapists and counselors, things of that nature, who can give you a more fully enriched, informed view of what's going on with them. Second, do what's best for your parents. That's hard because if you're dealing with your parents, sometimes your parents are going to push back on you and you're going to feel like, oh God, they're just making me work around this thing. But remember, at the end of the day, you want to do what's best for them. 3, address any legal protections. Like I said, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, DNR, estate planning, anything that may relate to possibly moving them to an assisted living facility or a nursing home, any of those natures. Think about talking to an attorney. Trust me, there are a lot of moving parts when you and your parents are working on what you are trying to do in terms of helping them transition to this new normal that they are getting ready to move into, or just a newer version of the normal that they have right now. 4th, be prepared for surprises. Trust me when I tell you, you're going to get surprised. You're going to talk to your loved ones and you're going to find out things about them that, guess what? They didn't tell you. Well, guess what? They're grown. They don't have to tell you. So what ends up happening is that you're going to find that there are going to be periods of time that you're going to really be upset because you didn't know. But I want you to be aware that surprises is a natural part, because guess what? There's some things about you that your parents don't know. Well, you're about to discover some things about them. And then 5th and finally, it is okay to be afraid. Trust me when I tell you, this is not the place that most of us have been prepared to be. I often tell my friends there are so many things that our parents did not tell us about being grown. This is one of them. So I want you to be aware that just because you're finding yourself now in this magical position and this tough position of taking care of your family, your parents, They're scared, and guess what? You're scared too. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with being in that position. Just know that ahead of time. And this way, you can prepare yourself accordingly. People, when you're at the point where caring for your parents become a reality, it can seem like a daunting and terrifying task. Just know that you have people in your life who can guide you and help you. Everything you're doing is to ensure that you give your parents the love, the respect, and the dignity that they have given you. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another edition of In the Know. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with others who might benefit. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with our latest episode. I'm Tony Reeves, and again, as I always like to ask, are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?